The vote that redefined humanity's place in the galaxy. The translation delay was exactly 8 seconds. That was how long it took for the Galactic Council's ruling to reach Earth. 8 seconds between the moment the vote finalized inside the Council chamber orbiting the neutral star of Helia Prime, and the moment humanity officially became a strategic concern inside the oldest political institution in known space. On paper, the resolution sounded careful, measured, administrative. But everyone listening understood what it meant. By majority consensus, the translator rendered into standard relay English, the Council determines that the Sol system represents an emerging military actor whose expansion trajectory introduces unacceptable uncertainty within established interstellar security corridors. Provisional containment measures are authorized pending further evaluation. Containment. The word spread across Earth faster than any public broadcast could explain it. Defense ministries received the message immediately. Orbital command authorities received it before the sentence finished translating. Commercial navigation regulators received it at the same time as civilian infrastructure coordinators. Humanity had not been expelled. Humanity had not been sanctioned. Humanity had not been declared hostile. But containment meant something older than any treaty language. Containment meant pressure. And pressure, in interstellar politics, always arrived with ships. The Galactic Council chamber had been designed to prevent moments like this. Suspended between 12 gravitational anchor arrays, the structure floated in perfect equilibrium above Helia Prime's ecliptic plane. Each anchor represented one of the founding species of the Council Compact. No delegation physically dominated the chamber's geometry. Balance was not decoration. It was policy. For nearly 8 centuries, the Council had maintained predictable borders, stable trade corridors, and negotiated expansion frameworks between dozens of civilizations that had once expected to become rivals. Conflict still existed. But escalation rarely survived long enough to become war. That stability depended on one assumption: that every emerging species followed familiar patterns. Humanity did not. Ambassador Elena Rao stood at Earth's diplomatic platform when the vote finalized. Protocol required delegates representing affected systems to remain visible until session adjournment. So she remained where she was. Still. Silent. Watching the chamber's decision lights settle into their final configuration. 7 votes in favor. 3 abstentions. 1 opposed. The opposing vote came from the Let Harry Union. That mattered more than the abstentions. The Let Harry did not oppose resolutions casually. They opposed them when they believed a precedent might become irreversible. Ambassador Io understood the message immediately. Someone inside the Council believed this decision might change the balance of interstellar relations permanently. Humanity had been present inside Council space for less than a decade. In that time, Earth had signed navigation agreements, trade normalization frameworks, communications compatibility protocols, and limited research exchange accords. None of those agreements included military integration. That absence had been intentional. Human fleet doctrine was not built for coalition alignment. It was built for land defense, distributed command, and independent logistics resilience. To human strategists, those decisions were obvious. To older interstellar powers, they were unusual. And unusual behavior in frontier regions created uncertainty. Uncertainty created risk. Risk created votes like the one that had just passed. Inside Earth's orbital command ring, the ruling arrived before most civilian networks realized the Council session had concluded. Admiral Nathan Okoye read the translated resolution twice before speaking. Not because he needed clarification. Because he needed confirmation. Verification source, he asked. Council relay channel, his operations officer replied. Cross-confirmed by 3 independent compact monitors. No spoofing. No misinterpretation. No translation drift. The decision was real. Containment authority had been approved. That meant Council-aligned patrol corridors could legally reposition closer to Sol-adjacent navigation lanes. It meant traffic inspection rights might expand. It meant observation platforms could appear near disputed relay zones. None of those actions were acts of war. But they changed geometry. And geometry, in space strategy, determined everything. Across Earth, the response was not panic. It was procedure. Emergency coordination channels opened between regional defense networks. Commercial traffic routing authorities requested clarification updates. Deep orbit construction platforms received quiet scheduling adjustments. None of those actions appeared dramatic from the outside. But together they formed a pattern. Human systems did not react quickly. They reacted deliberately. Inside the council chamber, Ambassador Io finally received speaking authorization. Her translation field activated automatically. "The Sol system acknowledges the council's decision," she said calmly. "We request clarification regarding containment scope and duration." A procedural question. A necessary one. Also a strategic one. If containment had limits, Earth needed them defined. If containment had timelines, Earth needed them recorded. Because undefined containment could become permanent containment. And permanent containment could become isolation. Isolation, historically, rarely ended peacefully. The chamber's presiding moderator rotated slowly toward her platform. "The containment framework remains provisional," the moderator replied. "Duration will be determined by observation outcomes." Observation. Another careful word. Observation meant monitoring. Monitoring meant presence. Presence meant ships. The council was not threatening Earth. But it was preparing to watch Earth closely. Very closely. Back inside Sol orbit, Admiral Okoye finished reading the council response summary forwarded from the diplomatic channel. He already knew what came next. He just needed confirmation that civilian leadership would agree. The authorization arrived 6 minutes later. Fleet Readiness Directive 3. Not mobilization. Not escalation. Preparation. Distributed patrol groups shifted orbital vectors. Maintenance schedules adjusted. Long-range sensor platforms activated extended observation routines. Supply depots began inventory verification cycles. Nothing visible changed. Everything important did. Beyond the orbit of Mars, construction lights brightened along the outer ring of the Argo shipyard array. Officially, production schedules remained unchanged. Unofficially, shift rotations doubled. No announcement explained why. None needed to. Shipyard workers understood patterns. And they understood timing. Inside the Galactic Council chamber, the session finally adjourned. Delegations began transmitting departure requests toward their assigned relay corridors. But several platforms remained active longer than expected. Observers were watching Earth's ambassador. Watching her posture. Watching her silence. Watching her reaction. They expected protest. Or negotiation pressure. Or at least visible concern. They did not see any of those things. Ambassador Io simply closed her briefing display and prepared her departure authorization packet. Her final transmission to the chamber was brief. "Humanity remains committed to cooperative navigation stability within Council space," she said. "We will adjust our posture accordingly." It sounded diplomatic. Measured. Routine. But analysts across multiple species noticed what she had not said. She had not agreed with the ruling. She had not accepted containment. She had not asked permission to respond. 8 minutes after the council session closed, Sol Command transmitted a secure message across every major fleet coordination node in human-controlled space. Fleet deployment orders were not issued. Not yet. But readiness thresholds changed. Observation corridors widened. Escort authorization ranges expanded. And for the first time since first contact began, humanity started preparing for the possibility that containment might not stay political for long. The Galactic Council did not fear powerful civilizations. It had survived them before. It had absorbed expansionist traders, territorial republics, resource empires, and even one species whose early interstellar doctrine had relied entirely on preemptive strikes. None of those civilizations had threatened Council stability for long. Because they behaved predictably. Predictability, not strength, was what maintained peace across Council space. And that was exactly what humanity did not provide. 3 hours after the containment vote concluded, the Council's Strategic Observation Directorate released its internal justification briefing to all member delegations. The document was not public. But its conclusions were widely understood. Humanity's classification had changed. From emerging participant civilization to independent military actor requiring monitored integration. The distinction sounded technical. In practice, it meant something very different. Humanity was no longer being evaluated as a new neighbor. Humanity was being evaluated as a future variable. The concern did not begin with weapons. Council species had seen stronger weapons before. It began with logistics. Human logistics. Most established interstellar civilizations followed a familiar development pattern after achieving faster-than-light navigation capability. They centralized. Fleet authority became concentrated. Supply chains aligned with government corridors. Military projection followed trade expansion. Humanity had done none of those things. Instead, human fleet architecture expanded outward in layers. Civilian traffic moved first. Industrial platforms followed. Then sensor infrastructure. Then defensive patrol routes. Only after those systems stabilized did permanent fleet basing appear. To human planners, this sequence was efficient. To the Council, it was unfamiliar. And unfamiliar structures were difficult to predict. The Strategic Observation Directorate highlighted 3 specific concerns. The first was distributed command authority. Most Council fleets relied on centralized coordination nodes. Destroy the node, and fleet cohesion weakened. Human fleets did not rely on nodes. They relied on consensus protocols. Independent task groups could operate without central command authorization for extended periods. They could resupply themselves, repair themselves, coordinate with civilian infrastructure, and continue functioning even if communication delays increased. That flexibility improved resilience. It also complicated monitoring. A fleet that could not be easily disabled could not be easily contained. The second concern involved infrastructure placement. Human orbital construction did not follow Council precedent. Instead of concentrating shipyards near core worlds, humanity distributed manufacturing across multiple orbital layers throughout the Sol system. Inner orbit fabrication supported rapid response vessels. Mid-orbit facilities produced logistics platforms. Outer orbit arrays specialized in long-duration hull construction. Individually, none of those installations appeared unusual. Together, they created redundancy. Redundancy created survivability. Survivability created uncertainty. The third concern was the most difficult to quantify. Human strategic culture. Council observers had expected humanity's first decade in interstellar space to follow a familiar diplomatic progression. Trade normalization. Technology exchange. Limited navigation agreements. Gradual integration into compact security doctrine. Instead, humanity signed trade agreements carefully, accepted research exchange selectively, and declined security integration entirely. Not rejected. Declined. That difference mattered. Human representatives consistently explained the decision as procedural. Earth's governments preferred independent defense coordination until long-term compatibility assessments were complete. It sounded reasonable. It was also unprecedented. No civilization had ever delayed security alignment after receiving Council navigation privileges. The delay suggested caution, or mistrust, or preparation. The Council could not determine which. Inside the observation galleries orbiting Helia Prime, analysts replayed human fleet movement patterns from the previous 3 years. Nothing aggressive appeared. No border violations. No unauthorized corridor expansion. No concealed deployments. Instead, they saw something else. Consistency. Human patrol routes repeated. Escort formations followed identical spacing geometry. Sensor coverage overlapped in predictable layers. Fuel transfer schedules remained precise. Maintenance rotations occurred on time. Nothing dramatic happened. And that was exactly the problem. Predictability inside operations paired with unpredictability inside policy created strategic ambiguity. The Council understood what human fleets were doing. It did not understand why they were structured that way. The Let-Harry Union understood. That was why they voted against containment. Unlike most Council civilizations, the Let-Harry had encountered humanity's expansion pattern before. Not from humans. From themselves. Centuries earlier, before joining the Compact, the Let-Harry had relied on distributed fleet doctrine across their frontier systems. Their strategy had not been aggressive. It had been defensive. Flexible. Survivable. Misinterpreting that structure had nearly triggered a regional conflict that took decades to stabilize. The Let-Harry recognized the pattern immediately when humanity entered Council space. Which meant they also recognized the risk of reacting incorrectly. Containment, in their experience, often created the instability it was designed to prevent. Back inside Sol System Command space, none of this analysis surprised human planners. They expected it. In fact, they had prepared for it years earlier. Humanity's first contact planning groups had never assumed smooth integration into existing interstellar institutions. They assumed caution, observation, testing, delay. What they had not expected was containment arriving this quickly. 9 years after first contact was earlier than projected. Earlier meant something had accelerated Council concern. Fleet Command needed to identify what. Admiral Nathan Okoye reviewed the Strategic Assessment Board summary transmitted from Earth's Diplomatic Intelligence Division. The conclusion was simple. The Council was not reacting to something humanity had done. It was reacting to something humanity represented. Resilience, independence, and long-term unpredictability. Not unpredictability of behavior. Unpredictability of trajectory. No one inside the Council knew what humanity would become. History suggested that uncertainty rarely remained unresolved for long. Across multiple Council-aligned relay corridors, observation platforms adjusted their monitoring schedules. Officially, these adjustments supported containment evaluation. Unofficially, they served another purpose. Measurement. The Council wanted to know how humanity would respond. Not publicly. Quietly. Carefully. Strategically. Because response patterns revealed intentions faster than declarations ever could. Inside the outer construction zones beyond Mars orbit, Argo Array shift supervisors received a routine scheduling update from Fleet Logistics Coordination. Production timelines remained unchanged. Inspection cycles remained unchanged. Material flow remained unchanged. Only one parameter shifted. Priority routing authority. Fleet support hull components moved ahead of commercial fabrication queues. Not dramatically. Not urgently. Just enough to matter later. Inside the Council Chamber's Strategic Observation Registry, analysts recorded the change less than 4 hours after it occurred. Not because humanity announced it. Because distributed systems always left patterns. And patterns always told stories. The Council had issued containment authority expecting caution. Instead, they detected preparation. Not escalation. Preparation. Which meant something important had already become clear to both sides of first contact diplomacy. Humanity did not intend to challenge the Council. But it did intend to be ready if the Council challenged humanity first. The first emergency coordination session began 26 minutes after the Galactic Council ruling reached Earth. Not because humanity reacted quickly. Because humanity had already planned what to do if this happened. The meeting itself did not take place inside a single capital. It did not even take place on a single planet. Instead, it opened simultaneously across 12 secure relay chambers positioned in Earth orbit, Luna's diplomatic complex, and 3 deep space command nodes operating beyond Mars traffic lanes. Humanity's response to containment was not centralized. It never had been. Officially, the session was called the Sol System Strategic Coordination Assembly. Unofficially, it was something older. The structure had been drafted during the early years of first contact planning. Long before humanity ever transmitted its first response signal beyond the heliopause. Its purpose was simple. If interstellar diplomacy failed, decision-making would not. No single nation chaired the assembly. No single military directed it. Instead, representatives from Earth's major political alliances, orbital infrastructure authorities, fleet command structures, and civilian navigation regulators participated under shared procedural authority. That arrangement confused several Galactic Council observers when they first studied human governance. They expected hierarchy. They found coordination. Hierarchy could be predicted. Coordination had to be learned. Admiral Nathan Okoye joined the session from the Outer Orbit Fleet Command Ring. His role was not to recommend escalation. His role was to explain geometry. Because containment was not a political condition. Containment was a spatial one. And space changed faster than policy. The Council ruling does not authorize interdiction, Okoye began once confirmation protocols completed. It authorizes observation corridors and patrol repositioning rights. A quiet pause followed. Everyone in the chamber understood what that meant. Observation corridors rarely stayed observation corridors. Traffic Inspection Authority tended to expand once it existed. And Inspection Authority altered trade routes. Trade routes altered infrastructure schedules. Infrastructure schedules altered security planning. Containment changed everything slowly, which made it more dangerous than sudden confrontation. The first question came from the Lunar Navigation Authority. How close can Council patrol groups legally reposition? Within negotiated compact limits, Okoye replied. That places them inside outer system relay adjacency zones within 6 weeks. No one interrupted him. Because everyone understood the implication immediately. Outer system relay zones connected civilian navigation grids. Civilian navigation grids supported resource movement. Resource movement supported shipbuilding. Shipbuilding supported deterrence. Containment did not target fleets first. Containment targeted logistics. Earth's diplomatic representatives spoke next. Ambassador Elena Io joined the assembly directly from her return transit vessel departing Helia Prime relay orbit. Her voice carried the faint delay of interstellar compression routing, but her message was clear. The Council is not preparing enforcement operations, she said. They are preparing evaluation conditions. That distinction mattered. Evaluation conditions allowed the Council to observe how humanity behaved under pressure. If humanity reacted aggressively, containment would expand. If humanity reacted passively, containment would remain. If humanity reacted strategically, the outcome remained undefined. That uncertainty became the central question of the session. How should humanity respond? Not politically. Not rhetorically. Spatially. 3 options appeared immediately. Compliance. Negotiation. Preparation. Each carried consequences. Compliance would reassure the Council. Reducing patrol activity. Delaying infrastructure expansion. Accepting monitored navigation adjustments. It would stabilize the situation temporarily. It would also signal dependence. And dependence inside frontier diplomacy often became permanent classification. Negotiation would slow containment implementation. Requesting clarification frameworks. Expanding research exchange proposals. Offering transparency agreements. It would create time. But time without leverage rarely changed decisions already approved by vote. Preparation would alter geometry. Maintaining patrol schedules. Strengthening escort coordination. Adjusting logistics priority routing. Preparation would not escalate the situation. But it would ensure humanity could respond if containment shifted unexpectedly. Preparation preserved options. The Assembly did not debate long. Because humanity's first contact planning committees had already studied this scenario years earlier. Their recommendation remained unchanged. Preparation first. Negotiation second. Compliance only if conditions stabilized. Fleet Command accepted the decision within minutes. Not because it authorized deployment. Because it authorized readiness. Readiness changed everything without appearing to change anything. Across Sol orbit, adjustments began quietly. Escort authorization distances expanded by small margins. Sensor relay platforms extended observation coverage toward outer navigation corridors. Maintenance rotations shifted to reduce simultaneous downtime across patrol groups. None of those changes required public announcement. All of them improved response flexibility. Civilian infrastructure authorities followed next. Cargo routing software introduced minor redundancy layers into outbound traffic planning. Deep space construction platforms received updated supply sequencing. Fuel depots adjusted reserve thresholds upward by less than 4%. 4% did not attract attention. 4% mattered later. Inside the outer construction zones beyond Mars orbit, the Argo array responded exactly as designed. No production increases. No emergency acceleration. Only timeline resilience improvements. If containment became pressure, shipbuilding would continue uninterrupted. That was the objective. Not speed. Continuity. Meanwhile, inside Galactic Council monitoring corridors, observers noticed something unusual. Human patrol spacing did not change. Human escort formations did not reposition dramatically. Human infrastructure did not accelerate visibly. Instead, something subtler happened. Human systems became harder to interrupt. Containment depended on predictability. Interrupt trade lanes. Observe response. Adjust pressure. Repeat. That strategy worked against centralized civilizations. It worked less effectively against distributed ones. Human systems adapted before pressure arrived. Which meant containment would need to become stronger to remain effective. And stronger containment risked becoming confrontation. Ambassador Io transmitted her final recommendation to the Strategic Coordination Assembly before her relay channel closed for transit recalibration. The Council expected reassurance, she said. They received preparedness instead. Preparedness was not defiance. Preparedness was not escalation. Preparedness was communication. It told the Council something important without saying anything at all. Humanity intended to remain cooperative. Humanity intended to remain stable. Humanity also intended to remain capable. If containment stopped being political and started becoming something else. Fleet deployment orders were not transmitted as a single message. They never were. Human fleet doctrine avoided centralized mobilization signals whenever possible. A single broadcast could be intercepted, analyzed, or misunderstood. Instead, deployment authority moved through layered readiness thresholds, distributed instructions that only formed a complete picture when viewed together. To outside observers, nothing happened. Inside Sol System Command Networks, everything did. The first adjustment appeared inside the Escort Authorization Registry. Civilian navigation routes between Earth orbit and the outer relay corridors received expanded protection envelopes. The change was small enough to appear administrative. Escort vessels were now permitted to shadow outbound cargo traffic farther beyond their previous patrol boundaries. No new ships launched. No formations changed. But protection geometry widened. And geometry was what containment depended on. The second adjustment followed 6 minutes later. Fuel reserve thresholds increased across 3 deep-orbit logistics depots positioned along the Mars-to-Jupiter transfer arc. Again, the change appeared routine. Fleet planners reviewed reserve levels constantly. Inventory shifts were normal. But these adjustments moved fuel availability closer to patrol corridors likely to intersect with future Council observation routes. Fuel availability determined endurance. Endurance determined presence. Presence determined influence. Inside the outer construction lattice of the Argo shipyard array, shift supervisors received an updated fabrication priority schedule. No emergency hulls entered production. No weapons platforms accelerated. Instead, something quieter happened. Long-range sensor frigates moved ahead of commercial infrastructure carriers in assembly sequence. Sensor frigates were not offensive vessels. They were observation platforms. And observation platforms changed what fleets could see. Across Sol System, Fleet Command called this stage visibility preparation. Not deployment. Preparation. Visibility ensured that if Council patrol groups repositioned closer to human navigation corridors, they would be detected immediately, not hours later, not minutes later, but as soon as their transit signatures entered monitored space. Detection preserved time. Time preserved choice. Choice preserved stability. Admiral Nathan Okoye reviewed the deployment geometry projection inside the outer orbit command ring. Three-dimensional traffic overlays expanded slowly across his display sphere. Cargo lanes. Escort corridors. Sensor coverage arcs. Maintenance rotations. None of them intersected Council patrol space. Not yet. But together they formed something new. Continuity. Human presence inside the outer system was becoming harder to bypass without being noticed. That mattered. Because containment relied on observation flowing in one direction. Now observation flowed both ways. The third adjustment arrived 18 minutes after escort authorization expanded. Relay redundancy activation. 3 civilian communication hubs positioned beyond Mars orbit switched from single-channel routing to multi-node distributed synchronization. Officially, the change supported traffic resilience. Unofficially, it ensured that no single observation platform could isolate human fleet communications inside the outer system. Isolation created vulnerability. Redundancy prevented isolation. Redundancy changed risk calculations. Inside the Strategic Coordination Assembly Network, civilian representatives approved the final transition step required before fleet deployment orders could be considered active. Cargo traffic sequencing shifted. Outbound industrial shipments bound for asteroid processing clusters rerouted slightly closer to established patrol envelopes. Not enough to appear militarized. Enough to ensure escort vessels maintained regular presence along those routes. Fleet commanders did not need to deploy ships. Traffic patterns deployed them automatically. 6 hours after the Council containment ruling, the Sol system crossed its first readiness threshold. Fleet deployment orders were now operational. Not visible. Not declared. Operational. The change reached the Galactic Council Observation Registry before it reached most civilian news networks on Earth. Because distributed systems always produced signatures. And Council analysts were trained to recognize them. Inside the Helia Prime monitoring chamber, observation officers replayed sensor relay updates transmitted from compact-aligned listening stations positioned near the outer edge of human navigation corridors. Human patrol density had not increased. Human escort formation sizes had not expanded. Human shipyard production rates remained unchanged. Yet something had shifted. Coverage overlap. Human patrol arcs now intersected more frequently than they had the previous week. Sensor relay synchronization improved across multiple orbital layers simultaneously. Fuel depot readiness margins increased along predictable approach vectors. Individually, none of those adjustments meant escalation. Together, they meant preparation. The Council had expected reassurance after issuing containment authority. Instead, it detected structure. Structure implied intention. Not aggressive intention. Stable intention. Intentions that were difficult to pressure rarely produced predictable containment outcomes. Inside Sol orbit, Admiral Okoye watched confirmation markers appear one by one across the fleet readiness display. Escort extension confirmed. Sensor coverage confirmed. Relay redundancy confirmed. Fuel redistribution confirmed. Traffic sequencing confirmed. Each confirmation represented a small adjustment. Together they represented posture. Posture communicated capability without declaration. The final deployment threshold required authorization from civilian infrastructure authorities rather than fleet command. That requirement existed for one reason. Humanity's defensive doctrine depended on integration between military and civilian systems. Fleet movement without infrastructure coordination created instability. Infrastructure coordination without fleet readiness created vulnerability. Both had to move together. Authorization arrived 3 minutes later. Orbital traffic control networks approved extended escort persistence windows along outbound industrial corridors. Escort persistence meant patrol vessels could remain in deep orbit coverage positions longer before returning for rotation. Longer persistence meant fewer observation gaps. Fewer observation gaps meant fewer opportunities for containment pressure to appear unexpectedly. At that moment, fleet deployment orders became complete. Still quiet. Still procedural. Still invisible to most of humanity. But complete. Across Council monitoring space, analysts recorded the final adjustment almost immediately. Not because humanity announced it. Because distributed readiness always left measurable patterns. Patterns revealed intention faster than declarations ever could. And the intention now visible across Sol system geometry was unmistakable. Humanity was not preparing for war. Humanity was preparing to ensure that if containment changed shape, it would not change suddenly, or without warning. The first civilization to notice the pattern was not a council member. It was a frontier observer state. The Neural Compact maintained a relay listening platform positioned along a secondary navigation corridor 2 light weeks beyond the outer boundary of recognized human traffic zones. Officially, the station monitored commercial shipping drift and transit safety anomalies. Unofficially, it watched new civilizations. Especially civilizations that expanded faster than expected. The station detected the change 9 hours after humanity completed its fleet deployment readiness adjustments. Not because human ships moved closer. Because human ships stopped leaving coverage gaps. Coverage gaps existed in every interstellar patrol system. Even the Galactic Council Compact accepted them as unavoidable. Maintenance cycles. Fuel rotations. Sensor recalibration windows. No civilization could maintain uninterrupted observation across an entire frontier boundary. Except humanity had just become noticeably closer to doing exactly that. The difference was subtle. But frontier analysts recognized subtle differences faster than anyone else. Because subtle differences usually arrived before major ones. The Neural Compact transmitted its observation summary to the Galactic Council Strategic Monitoring Directorate within 23 minutes of verification. The message contained only one sentence of interpretation. Human patrol persistence has increased without corresponding force expansion. Council analysts understood immediately why that sentence mattered. Persistence without expansion meant preparation rather than escalation. Preparation changed containment strategy. Escalation justified response. Preparation required reconsideration. Inside the observation galleries orbiting Helia Prime, Council analysts assembled a revised projection model less than 2 hours after receiving the Neural report. The containment framework depended on 3 assumptions. Human traffic would remain predictable. Human patrol spacing would remain constant. Human infrastructure would remain reactive rather than anticipatory. 2 of those assumptions were no longer valid. Observation overlays updated across the Council's monitoring sphere. Human escort vessels now remained active along cargo corridors longer than before. Sensor relay synchronization reduced monitoring blind intervals across multiple outer system vectors. Fuel reserve distribution allowed patrol continuity deeper into relay-adjacent space than previous projections allowed. None of those changes violated compact law. All of them complicated containment enforcement planning. The Council had expected humanity to respond diplomatically. Instead, humanity responded structurally. Structure created consequences diplomacy alone could not reverse. Inside the chamber of the Strategic Navigation Committee, representatives from 11 member civilizations reviewed the revised monitoring projections together. Their reactions were not uniform. They rarely were. The Horrell delegation interpreted the changes cautiously. Distributed readiness indicates uncertainty, their representative concluded. Uncertainty suggests negotiation opportunity. The Kothari Transit Authority disagreed. Distributed readiness indicates independence, their envoy responded. Independence reduces containment leverage. Neither interpretation suggested aggression. Both suggested difficulty. Difficulty changed policy timelines. The Leithari Union delegation spoke last. As expected. Because they had opposed containment from the beginning. What you are observing, their senior observer explained calmly, is not expansion. It is stabilization. Several delegations requested clarification immediately. The Leithari representative expanded the statement without hesitation. Human fleet doctrine assumes that pressure arrives before explanation. Their infrastructure is designed to prevent surprise. Containment authority creates pressure whether intended or not. The chamber remained quiet longer than expected after that sentence. Because several observers recognized the implication. Containment might already be producing the reaction it hoped to avoid. Beyond council space, other civilizations were reaching the same conclusion independently. Trade consortiums operating near relay-adjacent routes noticed escort persistence increases first. Commercial shipping algorithms updated risk models automatically when patrol geometry changed. Within hours, shipping insurers adjusted corridor probability forecasts across 3 outer navigation sectors near sol-adjacent traffic space. Insurance markets did not react to politics. They reacted to pattern stability. And human patrol geometry had just become more stable. Not less. That stability produced an unexpected result. Commercial traffic confidence increased slightly along routes passing near human-monitored corridors. Not dramatically. Not publicly. But measurably. The Council had intended containment to reduce uncertainty. Instead, it had highlighted the reliability of human escort coverage. Reliability changed perception faster than declarations ever could. Inside the Council monitoring registry, analysts began tracking a second-order effect they had not anticipated. Observation parity. Containment assumed the Council would observe humanity. It had not assumed humanity would observe the Council equally well. Yet distributed sensor coverage improvements across sol-adjacent navigation corridors now ensured that any compact patrol repositioning would be detected immediately. Observation parity altered negotiation leverage. Leverage altered political balance. Balance altered votes. 3 delegations quietly requested a review of containment implementation thresholds within 6 hours of the updated monitoring report. They did not oppose the resolution. They requested clarification. Clarification delayed enforcement scheduling. Delay created space. Space created options. Options created diplomacy. Inside Sol System Command space, none of this reaction surprised Fleet Command. Human planners expected observation parity to become visible quickly. That visibility was intentional. Observation parity did not threaten the Council. It reassured it. A civilization that monitored carefully rarely acted unpredictably. Admiral Nathan Okoye reviewed the Council reaction summary transmitted through diplomatic intelligence channels late in the orbital cycle. The analysis confirmed what he had already suspected. Containment was working. But not the way the Council expected. Containment had produced preparation. Preparation had produced stability. Stability had produced attention. And attention was beginning to change the conversation. Meanwhile, along one outer relay-adjacent navigation corridor positioned just beyond recognized Sol Traffic Authority limits, a compact patrol group adjusted its scheduled transit vector slightly closer to human escort range than originally planned. The maneuver remained legal. Routine. Procedural. But it marked something new. For the first time since containment authorization, a Council patrol formation and a human escort group were about to enter the same corridor geometry. At the same time, the corridor did not belong to anyone. That was the problem. It existed along the outer edge of recognized navigation authority where compact transit geometry overlapped with projected expansion vectors from the Sol system. Officially, it remained classified as a monitored passage zone, open to traffic, but watched closely by multiple civilizations. Corridors like this were designed to prevent misunderstandings. Instead, they sometimes revealed them. The compact patrol group entered the corridor first. Its transit vector followed a perfectly legal observation schedule filed 6 days earlier through standard Council monitoring channels. Nothing about the maneuver violated containment procedure. 3 patrol vessels. 1 relay escort platform. 1 long-range sensor carrier. Routine composition. Routine movement. Routine timing. Except the timing was no longer routine. Because the corridor's geometry had changed. 40 minutes before the patrol group crossed the relay midpoint boundary marker, the human escort formation detected them. Not visually. Not actively. Passively. Distributed sensor synchronization across Sol-adjacent observation networks identified the patrol group's approach while it remained several astronomical units outside direct escort range. Fleet Command already expected this to happen eventually. Containment Authority made encounters inevitable. Preparation ensured encounters would remain controlled. The human escort formation assigned to the corridor consisted of 2 long-endurance patrol cruisers and 1 logistics support vessel operating under Civilian Traffic Protection Authority. They were not deployed as a military barrier. They were deployed as an escort presence. That distinction mattered. Because escort presence signaled stability. Barrier presence signaled confrontation. Fleet Command intended to signal stability. The first decision arrived from Sol System Command 15 minutes after confirmation. Maintain course. Maintain spacing. Maintain transparency. No acceleration. No vector adjustment. No posture change. Human vessels would not avoid the patrol group. They would not intercept it either. They would simply continue operating exactly where they already were. Predictability prevented escalation. Inside the compact patrol group's command vessel, the approach notification arrived seconds later. Human escort presence confirmed. Range decreasing. Vector alignment stable. No deviation detected. That was unexpected. Council containment projections assumed human patrol formations would reposition away from observation corridors to avoid interpretation risk. Instead, the escort group maintained position. Maintained spacing. Maintained escort geometry around civilian traffic. The patrol commander transmitted an immediate status update to compact monitoring control. Human escort group holding course. No interference observed. Observation continuing. The corridor's midpoint marker passed between the 2 formations 12 minutes later. Neither group altered speed. Neither group altered formation. Neither group altered communication posture. That silence was deliberate. Because silence inside monitored corridors communicated something clearly understood across Council space. Professional restraint. Observation platforms across 3 separate monitoring stations recorded the encounter in real time. Sensor signatures remained stable. Emission levels remained consistent with routine escort operation. Weapon systems remained inactive. Communication channels remained open but unused. Everything behaved exactly as doctrine required. Which meant everything mattered. For the first time since containment authorization, human fleet vessels and a council patrol formation shared the same corridor geometry, without either side yielding position. Inside the Council Strategic Monitoring Directorate, analysts immediately requested extended observation coverage. Not because escalation appeared likely. Because the absence of escalation required documentation. Containment assumed pressure would produce movement. Movement revealed intention. Stillness revealed confidence. Confidence required interpretation. Inside Sol System Command space, Admiral Nathan Okoye watched the encounter unfold across a layered sensor projection model updated in near real time through relay synchronization channels. He did not issue instructions. None were necessary. Escort commanders already understood their authority limits. Maintain escort. Maintain spacing. Maintain transparency. Transparency prevented misinterpretation. Misinterpretation caused wars faster than weapons ever did. 7 minutes after corridor midpoint alignment, the compact patrol formation adjusted its observation vector slightly outward. Not retreating. Not advancing. Expanding its monitoring arc. The maneuver followed standard containment observation doctrine. It also acknowledged something important. The patrol commander recognized the human escort formation as a legitimate operating presence inside the corridor. Recognition changed classification. Classification changed expectations. Expectations changed strategy. The human escort formation responded exactly as expected. It did nothing. No pursuit. No repositioning. No signal transmission. No reaction at all. That response carried meaning. Humanity was not contesting the corridor. Humanity was not yielding the corridor either. Humanity was operating inside it. Calmly. Predictably. Professionally. Across Council monitoring space, analysts recorded the encounter outcome less than 4 minutes after the patrol group cleared shared geometry range. Encounter classification. Stable parallel presence. No interference. No escalation indicators. Observation parity confirmed. That final classification mattered most. Observation parity meant containment authority no longer guaranteed unilateral monitoring advantage. Containment still existed. But it now existed between equals inside the corridor environment. Inside the Strategic Navigation Committee chamber orbiting Helioprime, representatives reviewed the encounter summary within the hour. No delegation described the event as confrontation. No delegation described the event as escalation. But none described it as routine either. Routine encounters did not change corridor assumptions. This one did. The Let-Harry Union delegation spoke again before the session adjourned. "We warned you," their observer stated calmly. "What you are seeing is defensive persistence. Not expansion. Not provocation. Persistence." Persistence did not disappear when monitored. Persistence adapted. Inside Sol System Command Space, Fleet Command archived the encounter under First Contact Operational Events Registry classification. Not as a standoff. Not as a confrontation. As confirmation. Confirmation that humanity's fleet deployment orders had achieved their intended purpose. Containment could now observe humanity. But humanity could observe containment equally well. And across the monitored corridor where both formations had crossed paths without conflict. One conclusion became impossible to ignore. The Galactic Council had expected containment. To define humanity's position inside interstellar space. Instead, humanity had just demonstrated that its fleet could operate calmly inside containment conditions, without yielding stability, and without accepting limitation. The encounter inside the monitored corridor did not end the containment framework. But it changed what containment meant. Before the patrol crossing, the Galactic Council believed containment would define humanity's position inside interstellar space. After the crossing, the Council understood something more complicated. Containment no longer defined humanity. It defined the relationship between humanity and the Council. That difference mattered. Because relationships could change. The revised assessment began quietly. No emergency sessions were called. No public resolutions were introduced. Instead, the Strategic Navigation Committee requested updated projections from the Council Monitoring Directorate. The request contained a single instruction. Recalculate containment sustainability timelines under conditions of observation parity. Observation parity had not existed when the containment vote passed. Now it did. And observation parity changed everything. Containment worked best when one side controlled the geometry of attention. Observation platforms. Transit corridors. Relay access windows. Sensor positioning rights. For centuries, the Council had maintained those advantages across frontier regions without difficulty. Emerging civilizations rarely matched compact monitoring coverage during their first decades of interstellar activity. Humanity had done so in less than 10 years. Not through expansion. Through coordination. That distinction became the foundation of the Council's reassessment. Inside the Monitoring Directorate's projection chamber, analysts reconstructed the Sol-adjacent corridor environment using updated patrol persistence data collected during the previous orbital cycle. The results were precise. Human escort formations maintained stable corridor presence without exceeding compact navigation limits. Human sensor synchronization eliminated monitoring gaps without interfering with Council observation authority. Human logistics redundancy ensured patrol continuity without mobilization signatures. Every adjustment followed containment rules. None violated them. Which meant containment could not escalate without appearing provocative. And provocation created political consequences. 3 Council delegations requested a procedural clarification review within 6 hours of receiving the revised projections. The Horrell delegation asked whether containment thresholds required adjustment under conditions of sustained observation parity. The Vesh Collective requested confirmation that escort persistence did not constitute an authorized corridor stabilization. The Ilian Transit Authority submitted a technical inquiry regarding long-term enforcement feasibility along distributed patrol boundaries. None of these requests challenged the containment ruling directly. All of them challenged its assumptions. Assumptions mattered more than resolutions. Because assumptions shaped future votes. The Let-Harry Union submitted the shortest response. And the most direct. Containment succeeded, their statement read. It produced stability. That conclusion surprised several delegations. Containment was intended to reduce uncertainty. Instead, it had clarified something unexpected. Humanity's defensive doctrine was not reactive. It was anticipatory. Anticipatory civilizations rarely destabilized corridor environments. They stabilized them. Inside Sol System Command Space, Admiral Nathan Okoye reviewed the Council's procedural inquiries with quiet interest. Fleet Command had not expected containment to be reversed quickly. That had never been the objective. The objective was credibility. Credibility did not require agreement. It required predictability. Predictability produced trust. Trust changed policy faster than negotiation alone ever could. Meanwhile, Ambassador Elena Rao returned to the Council chamber for the first time since the containment vote. Protocol required no formal address. No response session had been scheduled. But observation rights allowed her presence inside the chamber's diplomatic gallery while procedural reviews remained active. That presence carried meaning. Diplomatic absence communicated protest. Diplomatic presence communicated engagement. Humanity remained present. Which meant humanity remained invested in the Council's future decisions. The Strategic Navigation Committee opened its reassessment session 2 cycles later. The agenda did not include revoking containment. It included redefining it. That difference mattered. Revocation implied error. Redefinition implied adaptation. The Council preferred adaptation whenever possible. Adaptation preserved institutional continuity. Monitoring Directorate analysts presented their updated corridor projections first. Sol-adjacent navigation stability had increased since containment authorization. Commercial traffic reliability improved along monitored routes. Escort persistence reduced transit uncertainty near relay-adjacent space. Observation parity prevented misinterpretation risk during patrol crossings. None of these outcomes matched containment's original expectations. All of them improved corridor safety. The committee's conclusion followed shortly afterward. Containment authority would remain active. But implementation posture would change. Observation corridors would remain monitored. Patrol positioning authority would remain authorized. However, enforcement escalation thresholds would require joint notification review before activation near Sol-adjacent relay corridors. Joint notification review meant consultation. Consultation meant recognition. Recognition meant status change. For the first time since first contact began, humanity's fleet presence inside monitored corridors received procedural acknowledgement as a stabilizing factor rather than a containment variable. The distinction appeared technical. In practice, it changed everything. Ambassador Io transmitted the update to Sol System Command within minutes of confirmation. Her message contained only one sentence. Containment has become coordination. Inside Fleet Command, Admiral Okoye allowed himself the smallest visible pause before responding. Acknowledged. No celebration followed. No declarations were issued. No posture changed. Because posture had already achieved its objective. Across Council monitoring space, analysts recorded the update as a procedural adjustment rather than a political shift. But frontier observers understood what it meant immediately. Humanity had not forced the Council to change its ruling. Humanity had shown the Council how to work with it instead. That distinction defined the difference between escalation and integration. Between pressure and partnership. Between uncertainty and stability. Weeks later, along the same monitored corridor where the first patrol crossing had occurred, another compact observation formation passed through escort-adjacent traffic geometry. This time the encounter lasted longer. This time communication channels opened. Not negotiations. Not warnings. Transit coordination acknowledgements. Routine. Professional. Expected. Containment still existed. But it no longer defined the frontier between humanity and the Galactic Council. Instead, it marked the boundary where first contact ended. And interstellar cooperation finally began.